Have you ever met someone and thought, why does this feel familiar? Why does this feel like a repeat of my past? Why does this person remind me of someone I've already healed from? If that's you, you're not imagining it, you're discerning it. Hey, family. My name is Erica, the host of Where Is Your Voice Ministries. And today we're talking about something people don't recognize soon enough: how to tell when someone is a familiar spirit, not a blessing. Because some of the people you call chemistry, connection, or my type are really just the same assignment wearing a new face. But before we jump into the signs, I want to start with a word God keeps highlighting: Isaiah chapter 43, verse 19. Behold, I am doing a new thing. Do you not perceive it? When God is trying to bring something new into your life, the enemy will always try to drag you back into something old. God brings new, the enemy brings familiar. So when the same type of person keeps showing up with the same traits, the same wounds, the same behavior, the same destruction, that's not coincidence. That's not chemistry. That's not your type. That is a familiar spirit trying to pull you back into a cycle God is trying to end. What is a familiar spirit? A familiar spirit is an unclean, repeating spirit that studies your wounds, your patterns, and your vulnerabilities, and then enters your life through different people who carry the same assignment as the last. Same chaos, same manipulation, same heartbreak, same cycle, different face. It's not deja vu, it's spiritual repetition. And it's not just romantic relationships. Familiar spirits show up in friendships, not just dating. I have friendships where deep down something in me whispered, she seems so perfect, something has to be off. And sure enough, it was. She was controlling, critical, a time vampire, always in chaos. And one day I literally said, she feels like a female version of my ex, because it was the same spirit behind both of them. Two different roles, same assignment. That's why this episode matters. You need to know the signs before you get attached, before you get confused, before you get spiritually entangled. Let's get into the signs. Sign number one: it feels like instant connection, but your spirit feels uneasy. A familiar spirit doesn't start with red flags. It starts with chemistry, not godly connection, not spiritual alignment, not real peace. Chemistry that hits fast, feels deep, feels rare, feels like, where have you been my whole life? But if you listen closely, your spirit doesn't match your emotions. Your emotions say, this feels right. But your spirit whispers, something is off. And here's why. Colossians chapter 3, verse 15. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts. The word rule means to act as an umpire, to decide what's safe and what's not. If peace isn't present, God isn't in it, because God brings peace. Familiar spirits bring intensity. Intensity feels exciting, but it doesn't feel safe. Intensity feels deep, but it doesn't feel grounded. Intensity feels urgent, but it doesn't feel holy. A familiar spirit rushes your emotions to outrun your discernment. This is why you can feel emotionally drawn, physically attracted, mentally pulled in, but spiritually unsettled. That conflict isn't fear, it isn't trauma, it isn't insecurities, it's discernment. Because God never forces a connection, but familiar spirits always do. If the connection is instant, but the peace is missing, it's not God, it's familiar. Sign number two, they know how to trigger you in ways no one else ever has. A familiar spirit doesn't just study your patterns, it studies your pain. This is why someone you just met can trigger anger, insecurity, sadness, fear, shame, depression, confusion at a level no one else in your life ever has. It's not because you're sensitive, it's not because you're dramatic, it's not because you fall too fast. It's because familiar spirits learn your triggers better than you do. They know what tone breaks you, what silence scares you, what behavior unravels you, what insecurity pulls you back, what wound weakens you, what lie you secretly believe, what fear you haven't healed. A normal person doesn't trigger you that deeply, that quickly. Only a spirit assigned to your wounds knows exactly what to hit. They have spiritual intel on your trauma. That's why the emotional reaction feels too big. That's why your mind races. That's why your heart sinks. That's why you feel shaken instead of steady. This is not compatibility, it's targeting. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against spiritual forces of evil. This means the person isn't the enemy, the spirit influencing them is. You're not reacting to the person, your spirit is reacting to the assignment. Why this sign matters. A God sent person will bring healing to your wounds. A familiar spirit will activate your wounds. One pulls you into peace, the other pulls you into chaos. One makes you feel safe, the other makes you feel small. One aligns with your purpose, the other destabilizes your identity. You can't fake this. Your spirit knows the difference. If someone knows how to hurt you and trigger you in ways no one else ever has, it's not love, it's a familiar spirit. Sign number three, they remind you of someone from your past who hurt you in your spirit, not just your memory. A familiar spirit doesn't always show up looking like your past, but it will feel like your past. You can't explain it. You can't put language to it. But something in you says, I've seen this before. This feels too familiar. This reminds me of a time in my life that broke me. This feels like a person I already healed from. And it might not be their face, it might not be their appearance, it could be their tone, their aura, their energy, their humor, their silence, their intensity, their emotional speed, their way of speaking of you, their way of reacting to you. Something about them touches a wound you didn't even realize was still open. This is spiritual, not psychological. They remind you of your past because the spirit influencing them is the same one that influenced the person who hurt you. Different body, different personality, different storyline, same assignment. And deep down, your spirit knows it. That hit in your chest, that unsettled feeling, that eternal drop in your stomach, that sudden heaviness is not trauma, it's discernment. Your spirit recognizes what your emotions haven't identified yet. First John chapter 4 verse 1. Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. God commands us to test the spirits, not the person, because the person may look new, but the spirit may not be. Why this sign matters. A God sent person will remind you of peace, safety, growth, purpose, hope, healing. A familiar spirit will remind you of wounds, old trauma, old versions of yourself, old battles, old cycles, old pain. If someone feels spiritually connected to a chapter you already closed, that connection is not your destiny, it's danger. If they remind you of what broke you, not what healed you, that's not love. That's a familiar spirit. Sign number 4, they trauma dump early, not to connect, but to disarm your discernment. A familiar spirit knows that vulnerability creates false intimacy. So they tell you their deepest wounds, their childhood pain, their ex stories, their heartbreaks, their losses way too early. Not because they trust you, not because they're open, not because they're healed, but because trauma makes people lower boundaries, feel compassion, overlook red flags, feel obligated to stay, and rush into emotional closeness. This is tactical vulnerability, not real healing. They want your empathy, not your discernment. They want to bond with your heart before your spirit has time to speak. Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23. Above all else, guard your heart. You cannot guard what someone is forcing open. Sign number 5. They show you a future version of themselves that doesn't match their current character. Familiar spirits love to talk in future tense. I'm going to change. I'm about to get better. I'm working on myself. I'm almost healed. I'll be different this time. They don't show you fruit, they show you fantasy. They sell you a potential version of them so you ignore the present reality of who they really are. God sent people are consistent. Familiar spirits are performers. They want you attached to the ideal of them so you overlook the truth of them. Matthew chapter 7 verse 20. You will know them by their fruit. not their plans, not their promises, not their potential fruit. Sign number 6. Your personality changes around them. You become a version of you don't recognize. When a familiar spirit is present, you'll notice you get quieter, you get smaller, you overthink, you apologize more, you walk on eggshells, you feel judged, you feel tense, you monitor your own emotions, you stop being your organic self. Your spirit shrinks around them. A God sent person expands you. A familiar spirit shrinks you. Your personality shouldn't disappear to keep someone comfortable. 2 Timothy chapter 1 verse 7. God has not given us a spirit of fear. If fear shows up, God didn't send it. Sign number 7. They bring chaos everywhere but blame it on everything except themselves. A familiar spirit often comes wrapped in drama, inconsistency, emotional storms, financial instability, spiritual confusion, constant cries, and constant excuses. They're never the problem. Something else always is. This sign frees people because chaos is a spiritual marker. God brings order. Familiar spirits bring confusion. 1 Corinthians chapter 14 verse 33. God is not the author of confusion. If your mind gets noisier around them, they weren't sent from God. Sign number 8. The connection moves too fast, faster than your spirit can process. One of the biggest signs of a familiar spirit is speed, not God ordained pace, not healthy development, not steady growth. Speed. They rush your emotions, your vulnerability, your trust, your attachment, your intimacy, your spiritual connection, your time, your energy, your expectations. Everything feels like we just met. Why does this feel so serious already? We barely talked. Why do I feel attached? They push for closeness before you even know their character. A familiar spirit wants your heart before your discernment wakes up. They don't give you space to think. They don't give you time to pray. They don't give you room to see their fruit. Because if you slow down, you'll notice the truth. So they create intensity so you ignore clarity. Proverbs chapter 19, verse 2. Desire without knowledge is not good. How much more will haste lead to sin? Haste, moving too quickly, has always been a biblical warning sign. God never rushes you into anything. He prepares you, He aligns you, He confirms it. The enemy rushes you because rushing hides reality. Why this sign matters. A God sent connection grows slow and steady. A familiar spirit grows fast and unstable. One builds your spirit, the other overwhelms your emotions. One gives you time to discern, the other pressures you into attachment. One brings peace, the other brings confusion. If someone is moving faster than your spirit has peace for, it's not God. It's a familiar spirit. Sign number 9. Your spirit starts to feel dull, disconnected, or spiritually heavy around them. A familiar spirit won't just affect your emotions, it will affect your spirit. One of the clearest signs that someone isn't sent by God is when your spiritual life suddenly feels harder, heavier, quieter, unfocused, distracted, inconsistent, numb, foggy, drained. You don't feel energized in the spirit anymore. Your discernment feels muffled. Your prayer life drops. Your desire for God weakens. Your clarity gets cloudy. It's like something in you shuts down, like your spirit goes on silent mode. You start feeling like, I don't feel like praying. I don't feel like reading my Bible. I can't hear God like before. I feel far. And here's the key: a God sent person will bring you closer to God. A familiar spirit will make you drift. The enemy doesn't need you to sin, he just needs you spiritually unfocused. Because when your spirit gets quiet, your discernment gets quiet. And when your discernment is quiet, familiar spirits gain access. Galatians chapter 5, verse 7. You were running well. Who hindered you from obeying the truth? Paul is saying, you were doing great spiritually. Who knocked you off track? Notice he doesn't say what, he says who, because spiritual interference is often tied to people. Why this sign matters: God presence gives peace, clarity, focus, strength, desire, discipline, joy. Familiar spirits give confusion, numbness, exhaustion, restlessness, distraction, disconnection. You shouldn't feel spiritually off because someone walked into your life. If someone makes your spirit feel heavy, foggy, or disconnected, that is not God. It's a familiar spirit. Sign number 10. They mirror your wounds, not your purpose. One of the most deceptive traits of familiar spirits is this: they don't connect with the healed parts of you, they connect with the broken parts of you. They mirror your loneliness, your insecurity, your fear of abandonment, your need for validation, your desire to be chosen, your fear of rejection, your unresolved childhood wounds. They say things like, I understand exactly how you feel. I went through the same thing. No one has ever hurt me like that either. You deserve better. I get you. And in the beginning, it feels comforting. It feels deep. It feels like someone finally gets you. But here's the trap: they aren't mirroring your calling, your purpose, your growth, your identity, or your future. They're mirroring your pain, because pain bonding creates faster attachment than purpose bonding ever will. A familiar spirit attaches to your wounds. A God sent person attaches to your identity. A familiar spirit says, I relate to your drama. A God sent person says, I will help you rise out of it. A familiar spirit says, We're the same in our brokenness. A God sent person says we are aligned in our purpose. One pulls you backward, one pulls you forward. 2 Corinthians chapter 11 verse 14. For Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. That means they can look like a blessing, talk like comfort, feel like connection, but underneath the spirit does not match the assignment. Not everything that feels familiar is from God. Sometimes it's the enemy imitating what you prayed for by echoing the parts of you that still hurt. Why this sign matters. A familiar spirit will make your trauma feel seen, but leave your purpose untouched. A God sent person will honor your past, but serve your future. If someone keeps connecting to your pain, but not your healing, if they connect more to your wounds than your identity, if they deepen your emotions, but not your vision, that is not love. That is a familiar spirit. Sign number 11. They refuse accountability, gaslight you, and twist everything into being your fault. A familiar spirit doesn't just attack your emotions, it attacks your reality. And one of the clearest signs is this: they will never take responsibility for their actions, but they will always make you responsible for their reactions. You'll notice this early. They blame you for their disrespect. They rewrite arguments to make themselves the victims. They praise everyone else around them but dishonor you. They speak badly about others except the people who enable them. They twist your words. They deny what happened. They invalidate your feelings. They make you question your own memory. And by the time they're done, you start asking yourself, am I the problem? Did I overreact? Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe it was my fault. Maybe if I didn't say that. No, this isn't sensitivity. This is spiritual confusion because familiar spirits do not operate in truth, they operate in distortion. Here's how you know this isn't just a toxic person, but a familiar spirit. One, you have this same dynamic with more than one person. Different faces, same pattern, same emotional outcome. Two, they somehow know how to hit your deepest insecurities, almost like they know your triggers better than you do. Three, you feel small around them, even when you've done nothing wrong. Your confidence shrinks, your voice weakens, your identity breaks down. Four, they celebrate everyone else but treat you like the problem. This is calculated. It keeps you chasing validation. Five, their blame makes you over apologize, over fix, and over correct. This isn't personality, that's spiritual manipulation. Familiar spirits love people who take responsibility for everything because it keeps you too busy fixing yourself to notice their darkness. 2 Timothy chapter 3 verse 5 through 6. Having a form of godliness but denying its power. They are the kind who worm their way into households. They look good, they talk good, they sound perceptive, but behind the scenes, they distort the truth and manipulate your mind. That is not random. That is not personality. That is a spiritual assignment. Why this sign matters. Gaslighting is not just emotional abuse, it is spiritual erosion. It wears down your confidence, your clarity, your discernment, your sense of reality, your identity, your voice. A familiar spirit uses confusion the same way a thief uses darkness to blind you long enough to steal something valuable. If every time you hold someone accountable, they twist it, flip it, and turn you into the villain, if every conversation ends with you apologizing and them being validated, if every conflict leaves you questioning you, that is not love. That is not normal. That is not clashing personalities. That is a familiar spirit feeding on your identity wound. Sign number 12. They move too fast into spiritual language, but with no spiritual fruit. This one is subtle, but extremely common, especially among people who deal with familiar spirits disguised as God sent connections. A familiar spirit will try to earn your trust by sounding spiritual, not by living spiritual. They'll say things like, God told me you're supposed to be in my life. I never felt this connected to anyone before. God must have sent you. I feel like we're meant for each other. God wants me to protect you. We're spiritually aligned. I prayed for someone like you. But watch this. Their spiritual language is high, but their spiritual fruit is low. Meaning, they say God this, God that, but they don't walk in humility, accountability, self control, purity, integrity, respect, consistency, honesty, wisdom, patience, actual obedience. They sound godly, but they behave worldly. They quote scripture, but can't apologize. They discern everything, but can't control their own flesh. They pray beautiful prayers, but violate their own boundaries. This is not spiritual maturity. This is spiritual impersonation. A familiar spirit wants to look like the real thing long enough to bypass your discernment and win your trust. Matthew chapter 7, verse 15 through 16. Beware of false prophets. You will know them by their fruit. Jesus didn't say you will know them by their words. You will know them by their charisma. You will know them by their spiritual phrases. He said fruit, meaning the Spirit of God produces evidence, not emotional hype. If someone spirituality is loud, but their fruit is silent, or if their words are holy, but their actions are harmful, that is a familiar spirit using spiritual language as disguise. Why this sign is important. This one traps believers the most because when someone sounds spiritual, you lower your guard spiritually. A familiar spirit knows this, so they imitate connection, depth, discernment, destiny, alignment, God moments, spiritual intensity. But it's all counterfeit intimacy designed to get you to bond emotionally and spiritually before you see the truth. If someone rushes spiritual language but shows no spiritual discipline, If they talk like God but act like flesh, if their mouth glorifies God but their lifestyle dishonors Him, that's not an assignment from God. That's a familiar spirit using spiritual language as camouflage. Now that you heard the signs, I want to show you something in scripture that proves everything we just talked about. Because familiar spirits don't just show up in your life, they showed up in the Bible the exact same way. The same spirit, the same behavior, in a completely different generation. Let me show you. Genesis chapter 19, Lot. In Genesis 19, Lot welcomes two angels into his home, and the men of the city surround the house and demand to drag them out and violate them. This wasn't just wicked people. This was a spirit influencing an entire region, attacking what God sent to protect Lot. Now, watch this. Judges chapter 19, the Levite. 100 years later, in a completely different location, with completely different men, the same thing happens. A Levite is staying in someone's home. And again, the men of the city surround the house and demand access to him. The wording is nearly identical. The behavior is nearly identical. The assignment is nearly identical. Different city, different generation, same spirit. Why does God show this twice? Because repetition reveals a spirit, not a coincidence. This wasn't just history. This was a pattern. This was a spiritual reoccurrence. This was God saying, pay attention. When something repeats, there is a spirit behind it. A repeated pattern means someone new, same assignment. New city, same spiritual contamination. Different people, same spirit operating. This is exactly what familiar spirits do today. They show up in new relationships, new friendships, new opportunities, new circles, new seasons. But the behavior, the outcome, the emotional damage, the spiritual confusion, it's the same. And just like scripture repeats warnings, your life repeats warnings too. You ever looked at someone and thought, did they all go to the same school? How do I keep ending up with the same personality type? Why do I attract the same kind of friend? This feels too familiar. It's not your imagination, it's a pattern, and patterns are spiritual footprints. You don't just attract toxic people, you attract familiar spirits assigned to the same wound. Dating history, same patterns. Friendship history, same pattern. Family dynamics, same pattern. Even your exes may have completely different personalities, but somehow the same spirit was operating through each one. That's not random. That's not coincidence. This is spiritual. And now that you've seen the spiritual side, it makes the sign clearer, deeper, and more undeniable. You're not crazy. You're not imagining things. You're not overreacting. You're discerning the same spirit that's been trying to repeat itself in your life. And now that it's been exposed, it cannot hide anymore. Isaiah chapter 43, verse 19. Behold, I am doing a new thing. Do you not perceive it? You cannot step into the new thing God is doing if you keep tolerating the repeated thing the enemy is sending. God is saying, can you recognize my new? Or are you so used to the familiar you can't perceive the danger? Now that you see the patterns, now that you recognize the signs, now that you understand the spiritual strategy behind the cycles, it's time to talk about breaking free. Because revelation without transformation is just information. And I refuse to let this episode end with you only knowing the truth but not walking in it. Here's how you start breaking free. Number one, renounce the agreement. Say it out loud. I break every agreement I made with the Spirit knowingly or unknowingly. Familiar spirits can't stay where agreement has been broken. Your voice is a weapon. Your authority is your exit. Number two, close the doors they came through. You close a spiritual door the same way it opened. You shut down the behaviors, patterns, wounds, and access points that drew them in. For some of you, that means blocking numbers, deleting threads, unfollowing accounts, removing gifts, cutting old soul ties, stopping emotional access, stopping late night texting, stopping trauma sharing, removing their voice from your life. Some doors must be locked, not managed. Number three, heal the wound that attracted them. This is where deliverance becomes a lifestyle. Whichever wound attracted this pattern, identity wound, loneliness wound, rejection wound, abandonment wound, comparison wound, people pleasing wound, shame wound, you need God to touch it because deliverance removes the spirit, healing removes the landing place. Ask God, Lord, show me the part of me that keeps drawing this in. Heal it at the root, and He will. Number four, let God reintroduce you to you. After a familiar spirit leaves your life, there's a season of rediscovery. You have to ask, who am I without manipulation? Who am I without trauma? Who am I without fear? Who am I without chaos? Who am I when I'm healthy? What do I love? What did I bury to survive? This is the season where God reshapes identity and restores the part of you that were stolen. Number five, surrender the future so God can cleanse the present. God isn't asking you to fix everything. He's asking you to surrender everything. When you release your need to figure out everything alone, He will guide you into clarity, peace, and protection. This is where the cycle ends and purpose begins. You are not stuck. You are not doomed to repeat these cycles. You are not too broken for God to restore. This clarity is the beginning of your freedom. God doesn't expose what He won't heal. He doesn't reveal a pattern He's not ready to break. He brought you here to set you free. And in the next episode, we're going even deeper because now that you know why these spirits target you and how to recognize the signs, next week we're uncovering red flags in the spirit, how to discern toxic patterns before you fall into them. This episode is going to protect someone from stepping into what they're not meant to carry. You don't want to miss it. If this episode opens your eyes, if something finally clicked, if you recognize a pattern you've been stuck in, do me a favor. Like, comment, and share this with someone who needs it. You don't know whose life, mind, or heart this might save. And comment below, this helped me, so I know who I'm praying over this week.